Hi, everybody, and welcome to our session today. My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm with Parenting Now from KW Counseling. I've been facilitating programs for about 15 years. I myself have 3 children, a singleton daughter who is in her early 20s, and fraternal twin boys who just turned 20 last weekend. Welcome.
And yeah, we're just actually so pleased to be presenting this workshop to the community. My name is Teresa. I've been with the agency for 14 years, facilitating conversations with parents as well as facilitating workshops and different snapshot series. My husband and I have 4 grandchildren, and we have 5 grandchildren. So we're just really so pleased and honored to be facilitating this conversation today.
Okay, so we're just going to share the screen here and bring the PowerPoint up. So welcome to supporting our children, our kids during times of stress. We are just emerging from a long period of uncertainty and unexpected changes, and we still haven't reached our equilibrium. So how can we help to ease some of our children's fears after the pandemic as we ease back into normalcy? Our goal today is to learn the link between parent-child attachment, which we'll also sometimes refer to as the relationship or connection. We're using those words synonymously to mean parent-child safe attachment and emotional regulation. So we're going to demonstrate how connection, relationship, is the key to helping kids manage their big emotions. So manage stress, fear, anxiety, jealousy, all of those things. And it's also key in helping us to manage our big emotions. So we're going to go into the theory and the biology and then how it relates with some tips and strategies. And just to begin the process of thinking a little bit differently, how to help our kids with their intense emotions and worries, and especially because we have had a very unusual past few years with a lot of changes. Our brains adapted quickly, and there's now some uncertainty about things going back to normal or starting to normalize some routines. So that's what we're going to talk about today. First of all, what is parent-child attachment? When we talk about attachment for our needs, we're talking about a safe attachment rather than a disordered or anxious attachment. So to be able to offer support and empathy that feels supportive to the person in need during high stress and anxiety, we need to understand what safe attachment is and what it looks like. As attachment and relationship and connection is the heart of all relationships. So an enduring emotional relationship involves perhaps feeling distress when we're separated from that person that we have an attachment to, especially with young children. And it's also the person that we turn to in times of stress or anxiety when we are in need of comfort and closeness. So you think about somebody in your own life, when you have a concern, when you're feeling anxious or unhappy, who do you turn to? Who is that trusted person that you feel more safe in their presence? And when we talk about feeling distress, when we are separated from somebody, that's just when you miss your child when they go to school, when you miss them after an absence, when they miss you when they go to work. And that's because we have an attachment with each other. So we talked about, as we said, the parent-child relationship is the heart of all parenting. And it is the most important aspect because it forms the foundation for every interaction we have with our children throughout their entire lives. So of course that can be a scary thought. With small children and babies, maintenance and basic physical needs are top of mind because they let us know through their behavior when they're tired and hungry and wet by crying, sometimes screaming, by fussing. We as parents often even start to learn to differentiate each cry sometimes. Oh, that means they're cold, or they just want to be soothed and rocked, or there's the hungry cry, the tired cry. So we instinctively work our connection at the same time, because with babies, we don't just feed and toilet. We have to really rock and soothe and shush. All of those things are helping towards the safe connection. And then as children age, we think about setting limits, following through, building self-esteem, all also essential aspects of parenting. And our relationship determines how all these other skills are made easier when children have a secure attachment. Of course, we know parenting is extremely hard work, and it also takes knowledge and skill and persistence. We need to practice these skills. And this safe attachment does not in any way mean letting our children get away with anything. Far from it. Setting and maintaining boundaries are crucial and essential aspects of a safe attachment. Children need those and want those and crave those limits and expectations to feel safe. So in this slide, we see that parenting with trusting, loving connections to ensure a safe attachment involves all of these aspects: the relationship, communication, emotional regulation, routines and structure, child development, comfort and soothing, safety, security, all of those things that are aspects of parenting. So to understand this, we need to understand the biology of attachment and what happens to us when we are feeling regulated and when we are feeling dysregulated. It all starts in our brain. And we, as human animals, our prime directive is to stay alive at all times. And it starts in our brain, right? So it is the control center for all of our activities, controlling everything from heart rate to complex thought. And it's the organizing system that mediates or manages all physiological, social, emotional, and cognitive functioning. And they are all, again, aimed at one primary goal: survival. It's the prime directive of our brain. And when our survival instinct is threatened in any way or perceived to be threatened, our brain and bodies become activated. This is normal, it's natural, and it's essential for us to continue to survive. So there's a stress hormone that's released, cortisol. All of our energy goes into other parts of our body in order to be able to run, basically, flee, or to fight. Now, that used to be danger from, maybe wild animals, weather, things like that. Those things don't exist for many of us anymore as a direct threat to survival. But being yelled at, intimidated, punished, feeling uncertain. I mean, if somebody that say laughed at somebody, if they went to answer something in class, those are examples of feeling threatened. Right away, we might feel that whoosh, that rush of emotion and feeling in our body. And it's actually almost like it's emptying our prefrontal cortex and logical brain of all of its thoughts and going down into our midbrain, amygdala, which controls our emotions, and then to our hindbrain in order to fight or flee, fight or flee or freeze. So to understanding the way the brain works when under threat is critical to understanding our interactions with our children, our spouses, our own parents, anyone. Because only by understanding how it works when under stress are we able to kind of deactivate that stress imperative and go back into our calm, logical thinking brain. So truly, even if you do not walk away with anything else in this session, it is the most important thing to understand that our brains are wired to create our responses to distress. It is not because someone's behaving badly or, trying to get under your skin. Their brain is behaving normally under the circumstances. But what we have to learn as humans is how, when we are kind of triggered into this fight or flight, to not react in those huge ways that we'll be regretful about later, and to have that session of feeling emotionally dysregulated be shorter and less intense. In other words, able to self-regulate ourselves as soon as possible to get back into our thinking brain. Because when that stress is activated, all of our logical thoughts are basically not able to be activated. That part of our brain is not able to be activated in that moment. So whether it's busy schedules and feeling unable to meet expectations, homeschooling, conflict in our daily personal relationships, just our daily worries and stress, our kids are affected by stress in the same way that we are. So we want to help you identify signs when your child is feeling stress and give you some strategies and how to deal with that positively. So there we are, hardwired for survival, fight or flight, or freeze. So we'll take a quick look at the 3 parts of the brain that I mentioned already. The lower brain, sometimes called the reptilian brain or the brain stem, it contains all our centers of survival. That's the part of the brain that keeps going when we're unconscious, when we're sleeping. It's got our heart rate, our blood pressure. And that is where our intense survival reactions come from. It is the reactive center of our brain. It's the impulsive center, the part that acts without thinking. For example, if somebody came up behind you that you didn't expect and jumped on your back, your lower midbrain would probably instinctively just shake them off or maybe even strike out, because it's a shock and a surprise to the brain, and our prime directive is survival. So the mid-limbic center is the emotion center. All emotions are processed in this part of the brain: anger, joy, contentment, frustration. And the little orange blob that you see there is called the amygdala. Sometimes we refer to that as a junkyard dog. It's always on the lookout for danger or negative emotion. And it barks basically, or releases cortisol when threat or the potential of threat is near. So the higher brain, which our goal is to be in that most of the time, that's the part of the brain where we think, we reason, we understand things, the logical part of the brain where we're able to say, you know what, this person really hurt my feelings. So I could go and scream and maybe swear at them, or I could ignore it, or I could write them a letter telling them that hurt my feelings. All of these thoughts, these logical thoughts that we're able to do when that part of the brain is engaged. And again, to stress, that part of the brain cannot be engaged when you're in fight or flight. It automatically gets kicked into survival mode. So how do we know when this is happening? We often know just from our thoughts, but there are physiological changes that happen that again are beyond our control. Often our eyes, our pupils dilate. We get quick, deep breathing in our lungs. Our stomach might hurt. Food movement slows down. Our muscles can get more tense. Our shoulders can go up. Our heart can beat faster. Sometimes our mouth gets dry. When people are doing presentations and their mouth gets dry, it's because they're feeling nervous. Their fight or flight is mildly activated, and their body is ready, actually, probably to run or to fight. And so saliva flow decreases because that's not something we need to fight or run. The reason that I really bring attention to that is that when your child is starting to exhibit some of those physical symptoms, you can say, oh, I see, Sally, that your shoulders are clenched and your eyes are wide and you're breathing quickly. So I can see that you're upset right now. Maybe we can take the time to calm down. So all of this leads to these moments that we're very familiar with: intense emotional arousal. So Daniel Siegel calls it flipping your lid. And he does what we call a hand model to demonstrate that. So my arm would be the brain stem, the reptilian brain, the part that's just responsible for autonomic nervous system. Okay, so brain stem, palm of the hand is the emotion center. My thumb is the amygdala or junkyard dog. And this top part is the prefrontal cortex, nicely and safely covering everything up. This is a well-integrated brain. All three parts are working together. And we can make our best decisions to the best of our capability in those moments. When we get angry or upset, nervous, whatever it might be, and we become dysregulated, all of our energy has to go into survival again. So our brain stem and our lid gets flipped, no more prefrontal cortex, and our amygdala is activated, and our junkyard dog is barking, which can look like crying, yelling, stomping our feet, whatever it might be. And when there's one flipped lid going off on somebody, often the other lid flips, because then they're feeling threatened. So our job as parents in that moment is to keep our lid from getting flipped in the first place. If it does, to be able to calm ourselves down and then be able to calm our child down as well. And then there's two integrated brains working together and communicating. So just as we are hardwired for survival, we are also hardwired for connection. Connection is hardwired into us, and as human beings, we cannot survive without it. And it's through our connections that we're best able to manage our big emotions and put the lid back on when it has been flipped. Connection disengages intense emotions, it opens connection to the thinking brain, and it increases motivation for positive behavior. So again, it disengages those intense emotions that we're feeling from our limbic midbrain, responsible for our emotions, and it opens the connections to our logical thinking brain, our prefrontal cortex, and increases motivation for positive behavior for the person that we are feeling connected to. So what are some things that we can do to help facilitate this strong, safe connection? You've probably all heard the phrase tune in. He's really tuned in. And really what that means is just being able to read and accurately respond to the needs and interests of others. It's being an observer and a listener. It's easier with babies, as we've said before. They let us know when they are feeling distress with crying, fussing, whatever it might be. Sometimes we are even able to differentiate between the different kinds of cries, whether it be hungry, tired, thirsty, just needing comfort. But as children begin to talk, we often expect them to tell us or to even soothe themselves. But the human brain is not fully developed until mid to late 20s. The last part to develop is that logical thinking brain, that prefrontal cortex. And they need us to be that prefrontal cortex for them, and or to help soothe them and engage that part of their brain. So behavior is communication. They're not trying to purposely misbehave, to break the connection. All behavior is communication. So often if children are misbehaving as they get older, really they are wanting that connection. They're wanting some attention, or they're feeling dysregulated. They might be feeling fearful or afraid or nervous. And instead of maybe asking for that, they might act out. And often this is completely unconscious as well. We don't consciously decide necessarily, I'm going to fight this person, or I'm going to run away from this person. It is just a physiological response to stress or to danger. So Teresa now is going to take over, and she's going to talk to you about, start with the building blocks of attachment.
All right, thanks so much, Kristen. Kristen really talked a lot about what's happening in our brains and how that affects, of course, our bodies and of ourselves and of our children. So we're going to continue on, and this is called like our building blocks of attachment. And really what this means is that all of us as humans, ourselves as parents, as well as our children, we all need to have what we call a safe haven and a secure base. A safe haven is where we feel like we can be totally ourselves. We have the safety and comfort, closeness of belonging. And there's a place in our lives that we feel connected to those that we love, and that we are comforted and accepted for who we are. And we also need what we call as a secure base where we can explore the world, where we can take risks, where we feel valued and we have opportunities for encouragement. So it's where we separate from those we love. We become our own person. We become independent. We become really, we are developing who we are. And sometimes people call it almost like a circle where we go out and we look for what we call our secure base. We make those risks in our life, and then we come back to those that what we call our safe haven. We think about, how can we support our children when they have a huge outburst of emotion? And when I ask parents what this might look like in terms of their children or in terms of themselves as parents, they may say things like, "Oh, I was so upset and I just yelled," or "My child just started to cry and to scream." And so, it is interesting. We quite often think about the big emotion, and wondering what in the world happened. But we sometimes forget about all the emotions that are underneath. So first, let's put on your oxygen mask, and we are our children's first and utmost influential role models. We as parents have had a very heavy load to bear in these past few years. But if we learn how to manage our own emotions and levels of stress, this will influence how our children manage how they manage their stress levels. So human beings are not fully developed until their main 20s, our brains. Okay, so that's just something that we do need to remind ourselves. So therefore, they need us to sometimes be their prefrontal cortex, their logical and thinking part of the brain, or they need us to help them engage that part of their brain when they're feeling dysregulated. Sometimes we think about counting to 10, 1, 2, and so on. It actually works. Why? Because we're calming our bodies and therefore we're calming our brains. Disengaging our intense emotions helps us to actually help us think with our rational and logical thoughts. And how do we do this? By using what we call our core strategies and working the relationship. People are motivated to please those they are connected with. So we're going to be looking at what we call core: curiosity, openness, responsiveness, and empathy. And we'll start with curiosity. So being curious, find out what our kids are thinking and feeling. Find out what they know and what they believe. Learn from our kids. We can be curious and delighted by the way our kids think and make sense of the world, but still we can disagree with their conclusions. When we show we're interested in their experiences, I mean really interested, not just interrogating them so that we can have more control over what they're saying and doing. When we're really interested, they will be more likely to talk about their difficult experiences as well. So really being curious about everything and anything, really expressing interest and respecting them, exploring their ideas, delight in what they say and do, really showing interest in what they think, feel, and know, and noticing new things about them and just different characteristics about them. Now, this is really interesting. When we look at communication, um, you know, saying things verbally is only 7% of all communication. Wow. Curiosity is about communication. Paying attention is to how we are communicating makes a big difference in how kids respond to us. So being segregated from our kids through social distancing and wearing masks, and parents and children being concerned about catching COVID has been real and has certainly impacted on relationships. And as we stated before, verbal speech is only a small part of communication. Some younger children, is what we're learning now, have really been struggling about learning language and learning communication as facial cues and expressions have been masked. Children have been spending more time in screens where there isn't the same opportunity to use expressive language, but they're just taking in information in a passive as a passive observer. Although social media is a great tool for communication, and I'm so thankful for that. Usage has increased dramatically, and studies prove about that texting does not increase happiness levels or feelings of connection in the same way that phone calls or being in person does. Children learn from their peers as well in school or sports or informal settings, and that has been largely absent in the last couple of years. So if we think about how we see and how our body language is communicating, we can use the same topic. We can say the same sentence in many different ways, but we can communicate a very different output. For example, we can say, "Come here, sweetie," or "Come here, sweetie." Come here, sweetie. And it means many different things. So the way we speak and the way that we're handling our body language communicates so much. Openness is about having an open mind and an open heart. It means that we are open to hearing about our child's experience, open to knowing really who our child is, not just who we think they are, and keeping to judgment to a minimum, which is sometimes really tough to do, isn't it, as parents? We're hearing from parents asking for support and how they might coach their children through social interactions after the pandemic lockdowns. Humans are incredibly adaptable, and patterns become habitual quickly, even when they are difficult or negative. For example, previously very social kids and teens may be showing some anxiety about socializing again because they're out of practice. Another example might be trepidation about going into space with lots of people. One strategy, one strategy could be to have exposure in chunks. For example, we may feel comfortable going to one store a day rather than several in one day, or starting to maybe have one friend over that we're familiar with rather than a whole party of friends. Responsiveness is about spending time with our children, doing things that they like to do, showing an interest in their interests and activities. For example, playing ninja or Barbies again and again, or playing soccer, throwing a ball around, or going to some of their activities, their ball games, their school concerts. Play and movement engage the pleasure and calming pathways in our brain. Yes, play even for older children is so important. Okay, so one way to restore, for example, getting their lid back on is to go outside and play something together. Then, when everyone is calmed down and reconnected, then we can have a talk about the original issue, what that may have been all about. How do you express love and affection to your child? Something to ponder. So let's think about special times, special affirmations, maybe writing notes to our kids in their lunches, or having special little nicknames that only you're allowed to say to your children, or maybe that bedtime routine, or the way that we wake up in the morning. I really like this saying, actually. Toni Morrison was a guest on the Oprah show. This is quite a while ago. And Toni was just mentioning, does your face light up when your child comes into the room? It doesn't mean that we need to do a happy little dance every time our child enters the room. But do your children see that you delight in them? that when you've been apart for a while, that reconnected moment is a delightful one. Are we happy? Are we truly happy to see our kids again when they've been away all day, or maybe when they've been away at grandma's? It's that warmth and affection and all of that other stuff that is heard much more readily when we interact with a delightful look on our face. E is for empathy. Empathy is our ability to notice and understand and respond to the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of others. It's our ability to kind of see into the experiences of the other person and fully imagine ourselves in that moment. It often means tapping into our own feelings as well, right alongside the person that we're with, without letting our feelings becoming the focus. That can be tricky. In parenting, empathy is about trying really hard to understand our children's experiences. And there is also a link to the Brené Brown video, and it really is a wonderful way that explains the difference between empathy and sympathy, and really encourage you to click on that hyperlink and watch the video. Here are just some nonverbal ways to communicate empathy. Just that shared eye contact and those shared looking. You know how with another person that you're really connected with, and it's like you both know what you mean, you look at each other and you know what you mean. Other people would probably not have a clue, but it's that shared looking. It's those smiles and those nods. It's the being close to. It's the open body posture. Does our body communicate like we are open for them, for our kids to communicate or come close? Or are our hands folded, kind of like, nope, no coming near? Are energy levels matching with our kids? Like when our kids come home and they're excited to share something with us, are we showing in our gestures and in our facial features that we're excited too? It's getting down to their level. It's sitting nearby, and where we're giving them our full attention without our phones in hand, without talking to another. And it's following our child's lead. It doesn't mean that we always need to do what our child wants to do, but it's fully understanding our child in terms of their temperaments and in terms of what they like to do. And it's like playing the games that they like to do. If we know, for example, that Lego is their thing, then, inviting them, hey, how about if we just do some Lego together, which gives an excellent opportunity for chatting. And those emphatic comments. For example, I understand. You seem upset. It sure looks like you're excited. Oh, I know how badly you wanted that toy, and I can see that you're sad that you did not get it. Or I notice you comments. You're working hard on that project. That t-shirt looks good on you. It was embarrassing when your teacher yelled at you. Or tell me more. Yeah, what happened next? So it's basically keeping the conversation going. So these are just some tips on some comments that we can use to show empathy. Our closing thought for this workshop is really a reminder that children are connected and feel safe, feel loved and encouraged in that connection, and they're motivated to please and do well. It does not mean that misbehavior will not occur. It means that you will have less cries, less crisis, less turmoil, and need for discipline or intervention when we work the relationship. And, it is, we just really love ending this with Dr. Gordon Neufeld, that yes, when we work the relationship, and the behavior will take care of itself.